Hi, I'm Alison Sepanera.
And I'm Taylor.
And we're the hosts of the Anxiety Chicks podcast, where we dive deep into the reality of anxiety, nutrition, and mental health.
Listen as we explore all things anxiety healing while keeping it real, including our own struggles with mental health.
We'll bring our expertise as healing professionals to the conversation while discussing the tools and strategies you need to heal the anxious mind.
Listen to the Anxiety Chicks on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Anxiety Chicks podcast. I'm Alison Sepanera.
And I'm Taylor.
And we are so excited to be back today for an episode that might be a bit heavy for some people, but so important to be talking about and raising awareness. I have talked a lot about some grief in my own journey. And today we have Lauren Sisler with us, who is going to share some of her journey with grief and addiction and kind of like the isolation and the shame that goes along with that, which can feel heavy, but I think is so important to kind of keep the conversation going about something like this. So Lauren, thank you so much for coming on today. How are you?
Yes, great to be on with you guys. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Always appreciate these type of conversations because, as you said, Allison, it's very important that we have these conversations for people to be able to lean into and recognize that they're not alone in this journey.
100%. And, so before we kind of get into your story, I want to tell everyone a little bit about you. So I want to read your bio here. Okay. So Lauren Sisler is an Emmy Award-winning sports broadcaster, ESPN sideline reporter, author, and keynote speaker known for her sideline shimmy. After landing her dream career with ESPN, reporting on college football and gymnastics, she began to open up about a story she once kept hidden, losing her parents to opioid addiction. Through sharing her story, she's been able to shed light on the stigma of addiction. Now, whether she's on the sidelines or on the stages, her purpose lies in helping people tell and love their own stories, live more courageously, and live resiliently, and find their own sideline shimmies. How amazing for you to be able to kind of start in a kind of career that you would never think would lead you somewhere like talking about this piece of mental health, right? Like how did that happen?
I mean, it's wild because, first of all, let's make sure everybody is well aware this has been a long process, because obviously we are 22 years from when my parents passed away from opioid addiction. And, obviously, as I share their story in a lot of different arenas, it never really gets easier. However, there's so much work and so many things that were part of the journey. And so I always like to make sure that people are aware, because it's not like I just woke up, days after it happened and I'm like, here I am, I'm ready to share their story. Let's go. Because there is the weight of it, the weight of the grief, the denial, the acceptance, and then, just the shame that has been attached to it. And then, as you mentioned, like coming full circle, because I did not grow up wanting to be a sports reporter. So I didn't know that I was going to be a professional storyteller. And then that career path comes into sight. And here I am telling stories for a living and then living out my own story by sharing that and being a voice for others. And so it's been a wild journey, but one that I'm grateful for, and certainly has had its ups and downs, but here we are.
Well, I'm so sorry to hear about your parents. And, grief is something that is it's kind of becoming a little bit more open with people talking about it, as we talk about mental health on social media a lot more now, right? But I think there's still such a stigma around grief and how it's supposed to look for people. But I can imagine you throw on top of your grief, like addiction. And I can't imagine like how those layers of grief and going through addiction and the type of grief you go through is just, I mean, everyone's valid in how they grieve, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about your story, kind of about that time of when it led up to your parents and how that was for you as you went through that.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the hardest things, and I've learned this in the process of now becoming more aware of what addiction is, what it looks like, how it affects people in so many different ways, because I was very oblivious to it. And I'll say this, growing up, my dad was an alcoholic, but it wasn't something I was really like privy to. Like I knew it kind of existed, but also like I was a gymnast and I got really good at compartmentalizing things. So it was like, oh, put that on a shelf, forget it happened, move on. performance, next routine, next man up, right? So that was kind of like how I operated in life. And so the addiction piece like just didn't resonate with me. And 10-year-old me had no idea what that meant. Like addiction, alcoholism. I just knew like my dad kind of like, my mom would get upset. You need to go back to your meetings. You know, money would be kind of a big mess. And then we'd just get right back to life and things were normal for 6 months or whatever until my dad would relapse again for, you know, a weekend or two. And it's just kind of the routine. So when we get down this stretch of, you know, I go to Rutgers on gymnastics scholarship. It was a dream of mine to compete at the collegiate level. We had invested a lot of time, my family and I, into the sport. And so I'm living out my dream, doing all the things at Rutgers, living it up, and never really knew or recognized that there was a major issue going on at home. Even when I was in high school, there were little things that were happening, obviously behind closed doors, sometimes out in the open, but there were things that I was so oblivious to as a young teenager that I never could put my finger on it being addiction. So my parents were going to a pain management doctor. They were getting help with the chronic pain they were experiencing. Mom had degenerative disc disease. Dad had chronic back pain. He was also in the military. So he had some issues with the PTSD, which was a big, issue with his drinking as well. But it was never like in my line of sight that like, oh, my parents have a problem. And, I think that was twofold. Number one, I think we put our loved ones on a pedestal. So my parents were the unbreakable, the tough, didn't want to see that they too were struggling. But then the second part of that is, as our parents, they did a darn good job of sweeping it under the rug. We're okay. Things are fine. Everything's fine. Everything's going to be fine. And, the two of those, the combination of that just kind of keeps you in the dark.
Were there moments that you can remember when you could see kind of their shift in personality and you kind of knew now looking back, maybe you didn't know then, but now looking back, you thought, okay, they were kind of deep in their addiction, or your dad was deep in his addiction at that moment. Can you?
Yeah. Oh, definitely, hindsight. And certainly when you understand and know addiction on a deeper level and what it looks like and how it can manifest, there were definitely things. Because, my dad's commuting over an hour each way to work every day. And in my mind, he falls asleep on the couch. We watch a movie, and felt like every time we'd lay down to watch a movie, sit on the couch or whatever, within 5 minutes, he's asleep. And I'm just like, he's tired. He's commuting. He's tired. It's the end of the work week. That was my thought about it. And then the other piece of that is, my dad was very like laid back. And then my mom was like the glue. So my dad would kind of, sort of the jokester and wasn't always the best with the money and, the finances. My mom was the one always keeping it together. And I'll tell you, when I look back, there was a specific couple instances, but one specific that really like jarred me. My mom got extremely mad at my dad for taking her medication. And in my 16 or 17-year-old brain, it was like, oh, it's just a pill. Like, you're going to go get a refill. No big deal. But when I say angry, to the point where she was like furious and like screaming at him, I can't believe you took my medication. And just to a point where I've never seen that much anger and rage coming from my mom. That was not her. And I'm thinking like, wow, like this is a big deal. And then, the next day it's all apologies. I am so sorry. And everybody's apologizing. And then we go on with life and everything's just back to normal. And so those are the things that started to creep up that, at the time I didn't realize. And then, the finances, I think that was another element to it. But to me, the finances were an issue because we built this house out in the country. My dad was still going to work. He had to take a pay cut because they sort of I forget what they call it in where he was working. But I knew that he had to take a pay cut. Mom was on disability. So there was kind of that perfect storm of things happening that to me were the reason the finances were a little messy. I didn't realize though that my parents are stroking $10 checks to keep the power on, right? Like I had no idea it was that bad because I'm going to gymnastics, traveling to gymnastics meets, getting on a plane, going to Hawaii to like compete at a gymnastics meet. There's no issue here, right? So it just was very hard to see it for what it was at the time. And looking back, if, I've learned a lot. I don't know that if I didn't have some of those little clues that I would even at this point in my life know that that was really going on. which is crazy when you think about it. Living under the same roof with someone and that being really the narrative for probably 2 to 3 years, I think. And especially that last year I was in high school. Things had probably gotten pretty bad and I just didn't see it.
So that last year in high school, were you still doing the gymnastics thing, like traveling a lot and stuff?
Yeah, so I was in gymnastics
Okay.
and I was commuting over an hour. So dad had worked in basically the town city adjoining where I used to do gymnastics. And so like I grew up in that same club. We moved out to the country, but we kept the commute going and the traveling going because our life was still there. But, I was driving myself. And then, the other thing is too, my brother, he was in the Navy. And so when he graduated, he was 2.5 years older than me, graduated 2 years ahead of me. He goes off to the Navy. Him and his Navy buddies are coming back and forth to the house on the weekends. Everything seems fine, and then I go to Rutgers and he's still in and out of the house, not every weekend, but every couple of weekends. And, I'm off at Rutgers doing the life, doing the thing, and have no idea that literally the wheels are coming off at home. Like everything is unraveling as far and as fast as you can,
So as much as you feel comfortable kind of getting into it, you just mentioned that, at that point it started kind of getting bad. Could you kind of describe or explain what that looked like?
Well, I think it's interesting because obviously in this process, we're 22 years since my parents passed away. There's a lot of things that I didn't know about what was going on and what happened. And even that night when that phone call came to me at Rutgers and my dad said my mom died, I was in complete shock. I just talked to my mom on the phone. She's 45 years old. Everything seems fine. So that was a total like, what? And then he said, get on the next plane you can. I'll be at the airport to pick you up. And he never showed up that day. And he also overdosed 5 hours after my mom. And I'll tell you, kind of thinking about the chain of events that led to this, obviously deciding to write a book probably helped in so many ways because there were so many black holes. Okay. Like it took me 10 years, y'all, to open up and read the toxicology reports. Like I refused because of the shame that I knew it would carry. Because if I saw on paper factual evidence and information that stated they overdosed, well, I couldn't run with my little, my story anymore, So that was like the first piece of it. But there's 3 paragraphs on this toxicology report to outline what happened that night from the time that my dad found my mom unresponsive to when he went to the hospital, came home, collapsed, and died. And so you got 3 paragraphs to outline an entire night full of wild and unexplainable events. On top of that, you've got hours, months, and years worth of time that has gone by that led to that night, and having zero comprehension of like, how did we get here? Right? Like, how in the world did we get here? And why in the world was everyone so blind to it? And I think that was the hard part for me, is like even scratching and trying to understand it. I don't think I'll ever have all the answers. And, it's easy to go back and say, what if, what if, what if, what if, what if? But, just the things that kind of led down that path and that unraveling, of everything, I think it started out very slow. And then it was just this descent that happened really quickly. And my parents just did a good job of making sure that descent was happening when nobody was looking.
I mean, first, I just want to validate that, your experience, and everybody's experience is so different, but your experience was as much as you, I'm sure, think like, what could I have done? I think about that all the time too with my dad. Um, your brain wasn't even fully developed yet. Like you were in college, you were fresh. I don't even want it, but your brain doesn't even develop till you're in like mid late 20s. And you're going through all of this and seeing a lot of things that you had to protect yourself from, probably, right? Maybe you immerse yourself in gymnastics, which as a psychologist, I work with a lot of kids and families that, go through trying to help their loved ones with addiction or themselves. And it's so complicated because there is such a protective factor for people that are the ones that are not in it themselves, but trying to help protect their loved ones. And it's so traumatic that your brain and your behaviors kind of go into this protective mode of like surviving because something's going on. It's like kind of, I'm not sure, but you're still also a child. And so you want to be a child, right? And so, there's just so much there's value in that, I think, when you think of it that perspective. And for anyone listening that is going through any of this with their loved ones, you only have so much control over what you can do to help. And it's so hard because they really do. There's a lot of people with addiction. It's such a disease that they do such a good job of knowing how to kind of like hide it from the people they love, because they're just trying to survive themselves,
Yeah. And I love that you bring that up, because I think it is important to recognize that, because, 18-year-old me, once again, I do go back to certain things and think, what if I could have done this different? But I also try to take myself back to where I was, not knowing what I know now, but only knowing what I knew then, and giving myself grace. And I think that's so important for the listeners out there, because it is easy to get tied up in the, if only I would have done this, or if only I would have done that. I think that it's so easy to constantly fall into that funnel of just remorse and regret and the what ifs. But here's the thing, and I say this, it's crazy, because as a professional storyteller, I'm also a professional question asker, right? So I ask a lot of questions in my line of work, and it funnels into my everyday life. My husband can attest to that. He's like, could you please quit asking me questions? And I'm like, sorry, it just happens. It's how it goes. But I think back to some of those moments, and I'm like, why did I not ask more questions? Why did I just allow it to manifest, even in the back of my mind, when I thought, well, maybe something's off, maybe something's a little odd? And I think that's where we have to give ourselves a lot of grace, because, it does take a lot of courage, number one, to step up to the plate and ask those questions. And so that's something I do as someone that now understands addiction. I have a lot more courage in asking some of those tougher questions. But also, I'm now 40 years old, right? So I've got a lot more tread on the tires, than I once did. And I think that, you bring up such a good point, because I do think that we as human beings are often hard on ourselves when it comes to situations, and especially with loss and dealing with, whether it's a loss of life or a loss of a job or a failure of what could I have done differently? And it's easy to do that. But my therapist, will go into the therapist world. Shout out to Neely Haynes out there. That girl has just helped me to really wrap my mind around some of this, but she helped me to realize too, like, you can't just always go into this right or wrong mode. We always want to go, it's either right or it's wrong, but there's a lot of gray area in there. And putting a label on something being right or wrong, I think that is number one, where we start to beat ourselves up, right? But we're usually living in the in between here. And so there's really no right or wrong. A lot of times it's just learning and growing and saying, okay, well, that happened here. How can I do something different? Let's try to change history. Let's try to change the course of the result that we saw there. And that's where we're learning and growing. And I think that's all part of being human, right? We don't have it all figured out, and we never will. But as long as we can continue to grow, that is the right thing, is when you're growing. The wrong thing is if you just unpack your bags and you sit there and wilt away and wither away because you're not willing to grow.
I think that that's so important. And I think that you're such a strong person, because I feel like when you go through things like this, especially it being your parents, I feel like people take one or two routes, right? You either take the route of you cannot handle it, you don't see another way out, and you just follow that same path. Or you do what you did and you say, no, the generational trauma ends with me. And I'm going to use this story and what I've gone through and be a voice for all these other people who maybe relate to me. And I think more people relate to you than you realize too. One of my best friends, she's so awesome. It made her who she is. And her mom also struggled with that. And it was tough on her. She saw it. She always felt like she had to protect her mom. And so she felt like she kind of knew what was going on, but a part of her wanted to protect her. So she didn't ask those questions, because she wouldn't invite friends over, because she was like, my mom's acting weird. But she didn't ever want to have that conversation with her mom about why her mom was acting weird, or like there would be dog pee all in the house, right? And her mom just didn't clean it up, and she was embarrassed of the house. So now it's crazy, the things that, like, when it's our parents, we feel this responsibility almost to protect them in a way too, because when you're a kid, they're kind of superheroes to you. You see your parents.
Gosh, yes.
So you almost want to put these like rose-colored glasses on and protect them. And I don't know, I think that you sound so much like my friend, and she's such an awesome person. And I think that it's cool to see the side where you take the route of healing and you say it ends with me and you grow from it.
I really appreciate those words, Taylor, because I do think there is that generational piece to it, right? And I talk about the chains, you think about the shackles of shame and, whether it's addiction. I mean, shame is such a universal thing. And it is something that literally will rob us of all joy if we let it. And so I've even had this kind of, awakening in a way, because I now have a almost 2-year-old. My son, Mason, was born on July 4th, so he'll be 2. And it's crazy because, I was visiting my parents' gravesite, and I remember standing there, like looking at the, columbarium where they're at, and he's clueless, y'all. He's like throwing rose petals around, just like, living it up, acting like a 2-year-old, right? Having fun. And, he's not asking questions yet, but one day he will. And it really, like, I told myself, I kind of grounded myself in that moment too, because I'm kind of standing there, and of course, all the flood of emotion and, just being back there with my parents. I don't get to visit them as much as I'd like, because they're in Virginia, quite a ways from where I'm at here in Alabama. But getting to be back there in that moment, it really has given me some time to think about the conversations that are going to happen one day when Mason understands and starts asking about his grandparents and who they were. And I've started to realize, like, I'm going to have the opportunity to tell their story. And instead of just leaning into the joy and the love and the success and the good and the happy, let's lean into the struggle too. Because I know in this life, it is so important to me. It's important to honor the struggle, right? Because that's part of our entire journey. And legacy is not always just like the good and the positive. You can't build a legacy unless you walk through it. Let's be real, because that's how life works. And so legacy to me is what you do with it when you are standing on a cracked foundation, when you are falling, when you are literally doing everything you can to get back to the surface and find your breath again. That's where a legacy is built. And so, that's a thought that I've now had as you talk about legacy, Taylor, is like, and you break those chains. Like, this is something that I hope to do by being fully transparent and honest with my son and with my family and with those that come after me. And it doesn't make my parents less than. They're human. And I want Mason to see that and to know that he can come to me when he's unable to stand on his own 2 feet and say, Mom, I need you. I need help. And also to come to me and say, hey, what is going on? Like, something's off, Mom. What's going on here? Let's talk.
You sound so much like my friend, but Alison literally said this line once, and it stuck with me ever since. Silence keeps us sick. So
yes.
You
And
never
secrets.
know.
Secrets and silence keep us sick.
Keep us sick. And you never know, even just like being open and honest with your son and making him aware that one day he could say, hey Mom, like I have these like urges or these things. Like, you, by just talking about it, you create this place of safety and security, and just being aware that people go through shit, right? Like, that's life. Like, we all
knee
have
deep,
something.
baby. We knee deep in it.
Like, literally, we all have something, and the more we pretend and act like we're like, nope, life's great, life's great. Like Instagram, you're scrolling, you're like, everybody's just so happy, right? But it's like, no, the more and my friend whose
That's a
mom
bunch of
yeah. My friend whose mom went through the same thing, she is so honest with her kids. And you know what I've seen? Like, she has one who's in 7th grade, and he comes to his mom and he talks about everything. And that's such a safe place to be.
And that probably makes her feel really good.
Yes.
And like, okay, I'm doing something right here. And again, we have to give ourselves grace, because there is no blueprint or manual or script on how this thing works, and some of it's trial by fire, right? And figuring it out. But I will just say, and I talk about the shackles of shame. I would encourage people that are listening, try it. Just take that leap of faith. You can either be scared or you can jump scared. Everyone's scared. So figure it out. Do you want to just sit here and just be scared, or do you want to jump scared and go after something? So if you're holding on to something that you're struggling with, that like you've been bottling up, just take that little leap of faith. Find someone to talk to about it, whether it's in a forum, a blog, online, with a friend, with a neighbor, with the cashier at the grocery store. Because I'm telling you, those shackles of shame, when you can start to own your story, own what you're walking through, own the good along with the bad, and lean into the bad and recognize, like, hey, this is me. This is who I am. It's not going away. You don't erase it. You find this freedom that I feel like, I personally feel like is such a gift, and a gift that I am so grateful that I've tapped into. Because as you said, Taylor, you can go one of two ways, right? Like, here, right? Finding that freedom. It's just like when I found that, I'm like, oof, I just want to give this to other people. And again, it's a process. It takes time.
I'd love to get into that a little bit because I want to hear about that freedom and what it took, I guess, for you to get to that place. So kind of bring us back again to that year in college when that happened with your parents, and how did you start the recovery process for yourself of healing with the grief of all of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I know there's a lot of studies and kind of understanding of how, grief works, right? And this whole timeline that obviously we don't put a time on it, but the stages of like the acceptance and this and that. I go back to Rutgers and I'm just like, what do I do here? My auntie Linda, said, Lauren, you got to go back to school. And I'm thinking like, are you kidding me? Like, I can't do that. I go back to school and it's like getting back into a routine, and you almost kind of get into the day to day, and Rutgers is where things were normal for me. So things kind of seem normal, but then I go back home that summer and my parents aren't there and things are just a total hot mess. And so you're constantly kind of weaving in and out of this reality versus like dream world, And so that was me for months and really years after my parents passed away. And I think that I got really good at like glossing over like the reality of things, right? Because I am Mrs. Optimistic. Like, yeah, everything's so great, right? That was always me. I was always an optimistic person. So I kind of started running with that because I was the one that was told, you're the warrior, you're the fighter and the overcomer. Like, you're so strong, Lauren. And so then in my mind, I'm like, well, I guess I better be strong because everyone says I am. So in some ways I use that as my superpower, but then in other ways it was like, it's like that balance of like, now I'm stuffing the junk even further and further and further and further. And really the breaking point came, I get through Rutgers. I did, start seeing a counselor at Rutgers against my original will. I was kind of like, I don't need your help, kind of being a typical teenager at that point. But then, kind of getting help, seeing that it was helping. And especially because we talk about the stages of grief, talk about anger. So it's like, I'm sad, but now I'm angry and I'm pissed. And I'm like, why me? Why my family? Why did this happen? And, and as a woman of faith, I started kind of doing let me lean out a little bit. I don't know about this. So you're going through all these emotions, but it's like that turning point starts coming. And I will say again, and I kind of equate it to this whole, like these walls I built up, right? Like brick by brick, these walls, this tower around me and my family to protect us. And then my auntie Linda really started to kind of help break those walls down and help me to realize, like, you can't change how your parents died, but your parents aren't defined by how they died, but instead by how they lived their lives. And it's like that shift starts happening that I'm like, oh, you're right. So again, it took a lot of time and we're unpacking a lot a lot happened in, this length of time to even get to that point. But what's interesting about it, and I want to say this, y'all, grief, shame is not linear. So like, again, my therapist kind of equated to this, and I love illustrations. And Alison, I don't know if you're real big on illustrations, because when I sit down in the room with her and she gives me an illustration, it's like I can see it as I'm living out my life. And I'm like, oh, there it is.
Yeah.
So it's almost like I had a door in front of me and I would just peek around the corner ever so slightly. And then I would get scared and I would slam it shut. And so it's crazy because, oh, by the way, my parents died. There was a newspaper article that literally has their pictures. My brother does the interview with the Roanoke Times. And in the subtitle, it literally says like parents likely died of overdose. Okay. Public knowledge, it's out there. Guess who didn't acknowledge it? Me. So guess who for the next 3-4 years ran with the idea that my mom died of respiratory failure, dad died of a heart attack. Literally told that to everybody. Okay. To sugarcoat what had actually happened. Well, I get to the end of my Rutgers career and I'm nominated for this award, the Wilma Rudolph Award. Well, I have to write an essay, and it's an award given to student athletes that are, competing in college in their respective sports and have demonstrated perseverance. So it's a perseverance award. Well, I have to write this essay, and guess what? I wrote the essay, but guess who did not write the first paragraph? Me. The first paragraph was literally written by my auntie Linda that basically states that the headlines, you see in the papers talk often about overdose and how addiction is, obviously becoming more prominent.
Yeah.
I could not bring myself to put pen to paper and write that piece of the essay. So it's crazy because like it's there, it's in writing. I allowed her to write it, but I wasn't willing to do it. And so yet I'm still kind of running with the same story. And once again, it's like peeking around the corner, taking a step out in the hallway, and then saying, oh, not quite yet. Let's go back. Let's go back. And so really that was my journey, like for years.
Can I ask you maybe a little deeper question?
Yeah.
And maybe you don't have to answer it, but are you aware now of that moment, or those, not just that one moment, but maybe those, how long that lasted, where you couldn't really kind of connect in your mind that it was an opioid addiction or an overdose that they died from? And are you able to connect that that was part of maybe like the shame that you felt about it, or was that not like a connection there at all for you?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good way to put it, because it's like trying to make sense of that. Like, how can this newspaper article be here? How can this essay be here, naming it addiction, overdose?
Yeah.
But I couldn't name it. And so there was such a disconnect, because it's almost like, you know, in a lot of ways, I've never actually gone this deep on it. So this is a good conversation we're having here. Some diagnosis here. Let's do it. I do think you're right. It's almost like the connecting cords, it's like they were severed, right? And it's like they weren't able to get to the other side of this connector. And I think a lot of that, again, is that protective layer and that barrier. And then, and just in trying everything I could to just not connect the dots, because naming it then means that you're having to acknowledge this very shameful thing. And even though I knew, because I knew like, oh, my parents were taking all this medication and they were just sick on their medication, but it wasn't their fault and it wasn't their choice and it wasn't anything to have to do with them. It just happened. It just magically one day they just woke up and they just were no longer living because they were in pain. Like, hello, you know?
Yeah. And the reality of it too, right? Like almost, you're seeing it and you're reading it, but if you were the one writing it, then it would be even more real that that was the reason it happened, and maybe you weren't ready to go there quite yet in your mind. I mean, you were still young at that point, like in the way that your brain's developing. So, I can imagine that was so hard, because the reality of that, the more that you kind of just like admitted it and did things for yourself,
it's like I had to do it on my own terms. Like it was not going to happen. Like it had to be on my terms. And it's even crazy because, in this process of writing the book, I did some interviews and I was talking to my athletic trainer, the one that literally was like, her and my gymnastics coach were like my second mom, my entire gymnastics career at Rutgers and beyond. And, I get back to Rutgers and we're talking about a medical professional literally is over there listening to me tell my teammates and everybody else that asks, or I get into a conversation about what happened with my parents, and literally saying respiratory failure and heart attack. Like and I even asked her, I said, why did you never question that? Like, isn't it odd that like that was the story I was using? And she said, yeah, but that was your story. And who was I to come to you and sit you down and say, hey, come on, we're going to talk the truth now. And so I think in a lot of ways, I was glossing everything over and everyone else was along for the ride, And I think that's crazy because, and I'm sure in other circles, things were being talked about. And, I'm sure the rumor, I know the rumor mills fly, but who was anybody to say anything? And she never corrected me. And this whole time, she, like everybody else, just kind of assumed like, all right, we're not going to ask questions. That's what happened. That's what happened.
And and to be fair for anybody watching or listening, this type of conversation is really difficult. So sometimes people just don't know what to say to someone, right? Or they don't know what to ask, or they're scared that they're going to say something and then they're going to either offend somebody, or they're just not sure, of how to bring it up. Even though we want the conversation to keep going, it's scary. It's a scary conversation. So like, what advice do you have for someone who might be going through something similar or something like this, whether it's grief or with addiction, or trying to process through difficult emotions themselves, to kind of help give them permission to maybe be open about it or have the language for that?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot to unpack there. And you're right. That is one of the hardest things that you can walk through, right? Because you want to protect your relationship with people and you're like, okay, if I pry or if I ask too many questions, I'm going to upset them, or maybe they're not going to want to talk about it. But I think that's where, number one, you just got to strike up some courage, right? Some courage to kind of ask those questions and say, hey, I want to sit down. I want to be real. Let's have a real conversation. And let me be honest with you. I don't love conflict at all. I hate conflict. And so I'm one of those, when I have to go into a tough situation, I get clammy. I get all like, blah, 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 blah. But you know what? I started naming it. I literally, if I'm sitting down and having a tough conversation, I just name it. I say, hey, as you can tell, I'm really nervous right now. I'm really clammy. And it always helps to relax me a little bit more, because then also too, it opens it up for the other person to say, I'm nervous too, or, it just kind of, I like to use the word disarm, because I think it's so important to disarm someone, especially when you're going to go into a tough conversation, a difficult conversation. Let's just say you have a family member or someone you love that you're just like, man, these signs are percolating. I'm seeing some stuff that I don't like. This person's behaviors are changing. How do I have this conversation? If you go into attack mode, or even if you go in ready to, you've got to be able to disarm that person and let them know you're an ally and you're not here to attack. And then like, let's talk about it and name what's happening versus like pretending it's not there. And that's something that's really helped me. And I think that's a skill that I've learned in the broadcasting industry, is the whole disarming of someone, because you've got someone who's getting these conference rooms with these coaches, and they are just like so tight to the vest and everything. They're so intimidating. And I'm just like, all right, let's disarm everybody. We're here. We're all here to do a job, but we're also here to just have a conversation. I trust you. You trust me. Here we go. And so really it's building that trust. And again, we use the word linear. That conversation may not be linear. And it might, again, just peeking around the corner, piquing some interest. Hey, I'd love to talk to you. Give them a little bit about what we're going to talk about. Hey, and maybe you only take one step in. Maybe you're only just wading in the kiddie pool right now. But that's okay. And it might be 6 months before you pick back up and continue that conversation. That's okay. But I think that you have to realize it's a process. And oh, by the way, let's let everybody know it takes a lot of work. Healing takes work.
Yeah.
It doesn't just do it on its own. Everyone says, oh, time heals. Yeah, but there's work involved.
Uh-huh.
And that looks different for different people. But again, that's why we have professionals in the room here that can help us with that, right? To move through some of those things and recognize that we don't put a timeline on it, and progress will be made. But guess what? We're going to take 2 steps forward and sometimes 5 steps backwards. Hey, you know what? I'm here for it. Guess what? You're still making progress. You're trying your darndest.
I love that. I love that. And I feel like, in saying that, in kind of naming it, it also gives you the power back, right? Like you go into a conversation, or someone asks you a difficult question, by just naming and saying, hey, sorry, I'm a little caught off guard, or, feeling a little bit nervous right now. Just give me a minute. Or just being able to say what it is that's happening gives you the power back of what's going on, right? You're not hiding it. You're not keeping it a secret. You're acknowledging it. And it's okay. It's okay to feel all of these things. And having the conversations about the feelings of the things is what's actually going to make you feel free,
Yes. Yes. And I think just naming it, like you said, I'm a fumbling mess right now. Let me like, whew,
Yeah.
and I think we're so quick to like respond. And I think that's why the defenses happen, right? We're so quick to respond. No, attack, rebuttal, right? But sometimes just say, hey, it's okay. You know what? I am caught off guard a little bit by this question from you, but you know what? I want to talk about it, but let me kind of gather my thoughts, and let's all come to the table when everyone feels deep breath. And I think that to me is how you can start to have more mature, meaningful conversations that ultimately end in a resolution versus a total attack, like fight, and we're not hanging out anymore. No more friends. Bye.
Yeah. Now you just got to get whichever loved one that might be like that, to listen to this podcast episode, and then maybe they can learn something, because there's a lot of people that don't get defensive with you.
Yeah. You like nudge them a little bit and say, okay,
like,
here we go.
Listen to
And it's a two-way street, because it's easy for me to address, hey, Alison, I feel like there's this thing that's bothering me. And then you bring it up, and then you talk about it, and then you get defensive, and then I get defensive back. And then it's just, woo, it's conflict resolution. And that's something I think that is so important in relationships in general, whether that's in your marriage or with your children, being able to walk through those things. And it's not easy. And trust me, I catch myself sometimes even with my husband, and I'm like, I just got really defensive for no reason. Like, back up, Lauren. back it up,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know?
yeah. Well, I'd love before we finish up, we do something each week called the healing tip of the week, and I'd love for you
Wait.
to get. Oh yeah. Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Yes. All the things, let me tell you, because I get a million questions and I've decided I'm like, I do a lot of speaking events and I obviously get 30, 45 minutes, maybe an hour, and it's not nearly enough to like explain all the things. And of course, the process and just really the overcoming. So it's kind of cool because the book really is the story, but it's almost twofold. It's almost like a game where, you have a first half and second half. And it's like, the first half is like the rolling through the mud and the trenches and just digging your way out. And then the second half is the redemption song, the redemption story. And so it really brings people, and my hope is it meets you where you're at with whatever it is you're going through in life that has created a shame or a stigma or, a sadness or whatever it is. And so, and that's kind of where, the overcoming the shame of losing my parents. And the subtitle is Down My Sideline Shimmy. And so that's something that's really, the sideline shimmy is just this thing that went viral because I get nervous before I go live on TV. I still get nervous. And it's like dancing was something that really helped to like eliminate some of those nerves. And so I basically realized that the cameras are always rolling. And so when I was dancing on the sidelines like an idiot, the cameras were rolling. And then I posted on social media and, the sideline shimmy was born. But really, why I included that is because everyone, has a story. And then ultimately, I want to help people to find their version of the sideline shimmy, whatever that is for them, right? Finding joy even in the mess, even in the darkness, right? And coming and bringing that to light. And so it's been a really fun and cool process. It's been grueling. I will tell you it's been grueling because I'm literally pulling every ounce of my soul out onto the pages of this book, but also like just to see the response and just people that are touched by it in so many different ways. Conversations are happening now that are disarming people to say, hey, let me have this conversation with my loved ones. And I think that's what's been really cool about it. And the whole idea with Shatterproof, that's the name of the book, is really kind of this idea. And I want to give this shout out to my friend Gary Schneeberger. He really kind of helped me to conceptualize this. It's like someone takes a baseball bat to your life and shatters it into a million pieces, right? But we as humans and the human spirit has the ability to pick up those pieces and create something beautiful, even in the mess of it all. And I think that's where resilience lies, is when it seems like all those pieces are bound and they're broken on the floor, that we have that ability to pick those back up, prove to everyone that we are shatterproof. And so I think that to me really is just symbolic of the book and the story and just the journey and the work that it takes to get there and to really take ownership of where we've been and where we're headed.
I am so excited to read it. I have not yet read it, but it is on my list. I'm so excited. And now I know a little bit more about your journey. It's going to even be, I'm going to be so excited. So,
I appreciate it. Thank you, Taylor, for
eh,
giving the
Well,
opportunity
it
to share
kept
that.
peeking at me, I saw you
My
set
little,
it
my
up.
little, like I was like photobombing us in the
There was
background.
like a little bit
Hello.
of you. And well, for a second, I was like, God, did she do that painting? Because I saw your name. Do you see
Yeah.
how, like, the bottom of your name? I was like, wow, that's a beautiful painting she did. Because
Oh
your
yeah.
body was closing it. And then I'm like, no, that's her book.
There I
well,
am
it's
photobombing myself. Hello.
so funny because like I don't know how big your screen is, Taylor, but my screen is like this big on my computer. I can't see like anything. So I couldn't even see what you were talking about. I was like, huh? Where? I'm also almost 45, so I think I need reading glasses and I just can't see
Girl,
anything. So thank you for
I'm
noticing
I'm
that.
I'm on your level. I'm like, I used to always have like the best vision, and now I'm like, what
Think,
is this?
I think I'm ready to like get a big screen. I think I'm gonna need a big screen. I think I'm gonna admit to myself I just need it now because I don't want to miss things like that. Are you kidding me? That's amazing.
Hey, well, Taylor, how old are you?
Well, I'm 30.
See, welcome to the third floor. Allison and I are sitting here on the fourth floor. Okay. We'll
There you
welcome you up
go.
here one day.
Yes.
Well,
Well, that's
actually, I'll
just
be hitting the fifth floor right when you hit the fourth floor. So here we go.
Oh, but that's why I love our dynamic, because we talk about so many different perspectives with different like generations, which I love. And even with eyesight, right? Like, thank God if Taylor wasn't here, I would have missed that somehow. But I'm so excited. It's called Shatterproof.
Shatterproof. Yep.
Shatterproof. Okay, we're going to put it on the show notes and any other. Tell us also. So let's go back to the healing tip of the week really quick.
Okay.
So we do a healing tip of the week. I love for you. I feel like you give us so many tips anyway, but I'd love for you to kind of give a tip to the audience that if they're needing help with any kind of, I know we talked a lot about shame and a little bit about like isolation when it comes to addiction or like mental health. And I'd love for you to share kind of like just a healing tip around those themes for anyone watching or listening.
So I've got two really prominent ones that kind of stick out and that have resonated with me over the years and have really come to light. The first one is fall in love with your story. What does that mean? Fall in love with your story. Because I feel like, again, we talk about the chapters in our lives, right? And the joyous occasions, the things that we love and we want to celebrate. Well, of course, like we love that part of our story. What about the part where we're down on the ground and we're getting kicked a million times? And I think that when we can learn to not allow our story to, those parts of our stories to go live in the shadows and isolation where it wants us to live, when we can bring those to light, we find that freedom. So I encourage people to learn to fall in love with their story because your story matters. The life you're living matters. And the messy chapters especially matter because that's where the resilience, when the lights are off in the stadium and nobody's out there cheering you on, that's where resilience is built. And so fall in love with your story. And then the other piece of advice, I'm giving you a twofer.
Love that.
I love this because a lot of coaches say it and it's something that has really resonated with me. Be where your feet are. And so I think that in life, it's easy for us to chase the next thing, go after the next thing. Oh, I'm going through this grief. I'm going through this pain. I want out. Get me as far away from it as I possibly can. But I've learned in this process is that sometimes, you got to be in it. You're never going to outrun it. Okay? My advice to you. You ain't going to outrun it. So sometimes you just got to stop and slow down because I think we're so often quick to be chasing that next thing. I want to feel better. I want to look better. I want to do this. I want to do that. Chasing that next job, chasing that next dream, chasing that big paycheck, whatever it is. But that's where a lot of times we lose ourselves and we lose ourselves in the future, in the distance, a place that we're trying to get to so quickly that we forget to be right where we're at, right where our feet are. And I've learned those lessons in so many different ways in my career and in life. And I will say now that I have an almost 2-year-old son, I'm living that right now and recognizing sometimes it's like, just put your feet on the ground, look down, pause, take a deep breath and say, I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. That's it. Your advice for the day.
That is amazing. I love that. Be where your feet are. It's so powerful. Honestly, I think I'm going to use that now with my clients.
Do.
It is such, and I mean, it's so powerful because when you think about just always not feeling like in control when you have big emotions, right? Related to any type of situation in your life, it's always because those thoughts are like racing about things that haven't happened yet or things that happened and
They're
that
literally not in your control.
Yes. Yes. And just being where your feet are is literally saying, ground yourself, ground yourself. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. This has seriously been so, so amazing. Now tell everyone where they can go to see more of you and hear more of you.
I appreciate it. I really appreciate this platform and it's never lost on me, just the opportunity to connect with beautiful young ladies like you who have obviously a gift and helping others and just this great platform. So thank you. At Lauren Sisler, my DMs are open. So if you want to shoot me a note, say hello, let me know you heard the podcast. Always love that. And so on the social media channels. And then I have a website, laurensisler.com. So if you want to log in there, jump on there. If you just want to send me a note, it'll go right to my email. Also too, I have a newsletter. So I try to send out some words of encouragement and things like that. So if you want to sign up for that, awesome. And that's pretty much it. And then the book Shatterproof, it's out. So if you have a lot of questions, or even if you just have a couple, I think the book can kind of answer some of those. And so I'd love the support on that. And, you can pretty much get that. Just Google search Shatterproof Lauren Sisler and it'll pop up somewhere, wherever you get your books. So I
love it.
that.
I love it. And we'll put everything in the show notes too. So you can just quickly go take a follow. And it's so nice to hear that you're so welcoming for people to contact you, because not everybody is like that.
Hit me up.
So
hit me up.
I'm always like that too. I love them. Like, everyone just talk to me. I don't care. What do you need? So thank you so much. This will not be the last time we're hearing from you and that we're collaborating, because you are very special. I'm loving your story. And thank you so much for keeping this conversation going. It's hard, and you've gotten through so much. So I'm very, very proud of you. I'm very, very proud of everybody who is working on themselves. So thank you again so much, everybody. We will see you next week. Have a wonderful week. Please like and subscribe and follow us on Instagram at The Anxiety Chicks. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Thanks so much for hanging out with us today.
We hope this episode reminded you that you're not alone and healing is always possible.
If something we shared helped you, the best way to support the show is to leave a review or share this episode with a friend who needs it.
And make sure you're following us on Instagram at The Anxiety Chicks for more support between episodes.
We're just two chicks on our own healing journeys, cheering you on every step of the way.
Until next time.
Take a deep breath. You've got this.